I got the signal. We're live here.
All right, sounds good. This is a real one, not fake, not pre-recorded.
No, we're on. Well, hey James, welcome. Thank you for joining us at Scale Transform today. For the audience's sake, I'll introduce myself briefly. I'm Brad Porter. I'm Chief Technology Officer at Scale AI, and I'm incredibly excited to be here with James Chen, who's the Chief Technology Officer for Flexport. So James, maybe I'll just start off by asking you to introduce yourself and share with us more about what Flexport does.
All right, yeah, thanks, Brad, for inviting me here today. Again, my name is James Chen. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at Flexport. I joined about a little bit over a year and a half ago, leading all the product and technology teams here. Here at Flexport, our mission is to make global trade easy for everyone, and we're tackling a very large-scale global problem where we believe by applying technology, we can really help the entire global trade ecosystem. And we sort of have two parts. One part is really building the technology platform for global trade, where we want to make the entire world supply chain programmable, and that's through digitization and then applying machine learning on all the data inside of the movement, to both understand what is happening as well as predict the future. And then on the business side, we operate a freight forwarding business, which is also helping the businesses to move their freight around the world, and through that process, making it really easy for us to help them focus on all the handoff coordinations across usually 18 plus different business or entity exporting and importing goods around the world.
I think it's fascinating. I mean, Scale Transform is obviously an AI conference, and we have a very AI-centric, AI-interested audience here. So I'd be interested, you can kind of go a little deeper into how you see AI transforming, global freight forwarding.
Yeah, AI is definitely going to be the impact of AI is going to be very transformative and massive because, I hope people can feel and understand, right? Nowadays, our global trade topology is getting more complex, and we're getting tons more data. And when I say complexity, maybe just maybe 3+ years ago, right? Like typically a global movement is you move a bulk freight from one country to, let's say, the central of a country like US, and then you have sort of 2 weeks distribution on getting the product out to the end customer or different large local warehouses. But nowadays, everybody expects to get the goods in within hours or definitely on the same day. So the topology, instead of coming into let's say tens of nodes, but now it's gonna be hundreds or even thousands of nodes. So how do you coordinate a global movement where your endpoint is that much? And the second part is, with the awesome advancement of technology, we have IoT devices or just a lot more systems that's emitting more real-time information. And it's at the point where both the complexity and data, I think it sort of exceed what humanly can understand very well. And I think this is where AI or machine learning can come in here and hopefully extract insights on, what are the options we can look at. And I'm pretty sure for a while, humans will still be involved with making the final decisions, but hopefully certain parts of the supply chain is predictable enough where it can be autopilot and let AI make the simple changes. And then, a good example of what that means is we know when there's disruption in the global supply chain, the customers or the consignees or the retailers, right? They're very agile on moving their network. So hopefully through AI, we can see, okay, if you want to make T-shirts or something, right, you can start popping and see, maybe there's a trend on sourcing from a different country that you never thought of before that can give you a competitive advantage. And obviously the other one is really the impact of weather on supply chain, whether it's local or global. Those are things that I think only through AI and machine learning that we can get a little bit understand the impact. Otherwise, I think as humans, we're just guessing.
Yeah, I think that's what's fascinating to me about AI. There's kind of this concept that like AI, you just like build a model and then it runs. But these ML AI systems are always interacting with the real world, and the real world's super messy, right? I mean, when I was at Amazon last year, obviously a lot of Amazon supply chain forecasting is ML powered now, but all of that had to change when COVID hit. I saw a visualization today that showed that there's a significant amount of rerouting of global trade around the southern tip of South America right now, because 10% of global trade is at a standstill because there's a container ship blocking the Suez Canal. Does that kind of real world disruption affect Flexport and how you think about the models you're building?
Oh yeah, definitely. The big ship is stuck there right now, and unfortunately, unfortunately, right? Like, because our business is so big now, we actually have containers on that ship right now, right? And we also have containers sitting on the ship waiting for it to be unblocked, and then we have ships that's trying to decide, should I go around the south part of Africa or do I go forward? So I think the wonderful thing about working in freight forwarding or global trade is that a lot of time when you hear on the news, it's actually very applicable to our business. So it's pretty funny, and always have family member asking, "Hey, is that container falling a ship? Is that the one yours?" and stuff like that. So definitely very very relevant. But the hard part, right, is really trying to figure out what does that mean? Like, how do we use what you see visually, and then hopefully through technology understand like how what should we do, right? Like, I think that's the most interesting question. We know it's being stuck, so then can we create a model, which I think is really hard since it's the first time it happens, right? Where when is this ship can be unlodged, right? When is the global trade being unblocked? And the other thing that's a little bit more practical is a lot of these goods, right, needs to be in a warehouse where people can buy it online. So now you have a lot of companies who might be running out of inventory for people to purchase. So that's a big problem. And then before that, we sort of have probably truck schedule or barge schedule at labor schedule at the terminals to take these goods from the ship. But now you have no idea when it's going to show up, right? So for me, there's definitely a lot of very interesting real life situations. But what's interesting for me is that actually I feel this problem is not that hard yet, because we actually know where it is. But I think a couple months ago, we definitely seen container falling off ships. To me, that's really, really hard, because today we have no idea if one of our customers' container fell off that ship. So the only way to verify is when that ship docks itself, and then when they start pulling container off, then at that point you know that, hey, is it on there or not? And remember, there's insurance, right? There's capital, there's restocking, there's so many business decisions that needs to be made. So hopefully someday, right, we can have a good model to say, yeah, there's an 80% chance it's on there, or 20% based on the position of the container. Those are things I think that can really help out improve in this space.
Yeah, fascinating. Hey, I want to dig a little bit deeper into your background. As we were preparing for this event, we were sharing some of our shared stories of MIT. Yep. And we were both fortunate to take our kind of intro to artificial intelligence class with Professor Patrick Winston. And so I'm curious what you remember for that course, and really how you've seen AI change in the last 25 years, really.
Yeah, definitely remember taking a class from Professor Winston. I mean, one thing I remember is that it's amazing like how much knowledge he has in his head, and he can go through the whole entire lecture without looking at notes. So you really understand what he's talking about. But I think from that class, I think I really learned the fundamentals of AI, whether it's rule-based, expert systems, breadth, depth search, min-max, alpha, beta. I think a lot of these things that people take it for granted that 25 years ago, these are sort of leading ideas that can be done. But the thing that I learned, which is still very applicable today, right, is that you have all these different framework algorithms or tools. In my mind, it is really important to understand what is the fundamental problem you're solving, and then pick the right tool to apply to it to get the best result. And I think with the speakers earlier today, right, that's sort of what they talk about. Like, sometimes the algorithm could be good and you need to fix the data, right? Sometimes the data might be bad and you need to change the algorithm to take advantage of maybe the sparse data set you have. So I think learning what to pick is probably the most important thing I learned in that class. But what has changed in the last 25 years is really the practical applications of AI. I feel there's also an earlier example, right? There's like medical screening, self-driving cars, infinite worlds and games nowadays. You have an AI engine that can sort of simulate a lot of things, make it fairly entertaining. And the part that I like the best is really more about creating these realistic arts and videos. I thought it's pretty cool way of applying AI to say, hey, let's create art that looks like Monet or Van Gogh or stuff like that, and it's pretty good. So so it's great to see that it's becoming easier and easier to take advantage of all the AI advancements in this world.
Yeah, I mean, what I remember from that class was reviewing another set of students in the class. They were presenting their project, and they had built solved a robotics control problem with a 4-node perceptron.
Oh
wow! These days, the deep networks are quite a bit bigger.
Yep.
But it's incredible how much is advanced.
Yeah, definitely.
Beyond just the shared kind of MIT connection, there's a lot of similarity. You and I have both have been entrepreneurs working at startups, and then both had the opportunity to lead big teams at Amazon. I'm curious what you take from each to your role at Flexport now.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's great that we shared both that working in a small company, super agile experience, right? And then working in a large company, try to remain agile as you scale. So definitely a lot of learning. Like for me, really, in addition, to me, the part that's very interesting is that technology is always evolving, right? Like going back to my first startup in 1999, I think we used like Perl, CoFusion. You had to install and set up your own servers. And then like second startup, I sort of move into the LAMP stack, PHP, MySQL, jQuery. And then even more recently, I think here at Flexport, we use Ruby and then Postgres and then maybe DocumentDB related. So for me, like the technology is always changing, and is really important to make sure that you are always in tune on what is the latest, and then make a really good judgment on, is this something we should use for the startup, or is it too early, right? Because you don't want to spend time playing around with the tools and not really figuring out how to build a business. So I think on the startup side is really need to be able to learn stuff quickly and see how it can apply to the problem you're solving for your startup. And then at Amazon, even Rakuten, I got a chance to manage hundreds and also 1,000 people. It's trying to figure out like, how do you coordinate that many groups and teams to go after the same mission or product line, right? Like, as you get bigger, as your product and service offering is becoming more complex, you sort of have to figure out what things you want to standardize, what things you don't want to have duplication or non-productive duplication of work, right? Sometimes it's always okay, but a lot of times you should not. Meanwhile, you want to remain agile and trying to make sure that you create an environment where each team can be as autonomous as possible, where they can do full end-to-end ownership of the service. But as a whole, it still runs, right? I think that's sort of I think the thing that we probably learn at Amazon. And then here at Flexport today, the thing that I learned is like, yeah, we should always, luckily we're pretty well funded and we're pretty big right now, where we always need to invest a little bit into the future R&D. Make sure that we put enough time to evaluate proof of concept of the latest tech versus saying, hey, let's just keep on going. We know how it works. Let's push on this. So this way we can stay relevant and not fade away. And then in terms of scaling, we're planning to grow from around 425 people in my org today to 650 plus. So we're hiring 250 people and scale. And what does that mean? Well, it means our IT and product infrastructure, right, needs to be also up level so that each of these different teams we provide can remain productive. But and of course, it's really hard when you do this transition that you definitely need to slow down a little bit before it can go fast. So that's sort of what's happening at Flexport. But how about you, Brad? Like, what are the 2-3 things that you found to be pretty interesting learnings from your startup in Amazon?
Yeah, it's really cool because I am finding that I'm tapping both the things I learned in kind of the first 10 years in Silicon Valley, hypergrowth, and things I learned at Amazon. I think one of the things you talked about at Amazon, just allowing for empowered teams to move very quickly, is something Amazon's done really, really well. And I think it's a key thing that that as I've come into scale, I've wanted to reinforce and accelerate. Like, how do you make decisions that unblock teams quickly? And yet, at the same time, with a startup, you need to be able to swarm. You need to be able to scramble, right?
Yep.
You need to be able to jump on a hotspot very quickly, right? You don't have mature systems everywhere yet, right?
Yep.
And so problems can emerge, and you need a team that can both. So trying to balance that, giving everyone autonomy and independence and empowerment to move quickly with the need to be able to swarm flexibly is a key thing that I'm building that alongside my leads and my team.
Right, and it's also really hard to maintain a right schedule, right? You're also trying to build service and product out there, and then meanwhile, short term comes in. It's we as a start, you don't have all the resources like Amazon. That tens of thousands of people can come in. If it's that important, you immediately can do it. But as a startup, right, it's always hard. You have to make that trade off on. Is it important enough to swarm on this now, and what's the impact? And it's hard. There's no right answer. You just have to make the best judgment as it happens.
No, exactly. The other ingredient I'm bringing, obviously, and I think it's not just that I'm bringing it to scale. Like, one of the things I selected for in deciding to make a move from Amazon was to find another company with a similar commitment to customer experience, right? Yep. To customer obsession. And I know Flexport talks about that a lot as well, and I'm sure that's deeply ingrained in you. How are you thinking about customer obsession as you shape the technology at Flexport?
Yeah, people know, right? This is one of the few remaining large industries where not too much tech adoption as an industry. There's definitely companies who's really, really good at it. And then when Flexport came into the space, we put the customer as front and center on what do they want to see versus what's happening behind the scenes to get the work done. Because I think a lot of the historical user-facing applications done from that view, right? Hey, we have these data, let's show it. We're doing these processes, let's show it. Oh, let's treat these the ocean, the air, the trucking like very differently, right? Because 3 different business units doing all that stuff. Well, but from the user's perspective, with that sole focus, we actually have we measure NPS scores and CSAT score to make sure that we try. Although it's very fuzzy, right? But it gives you a really good indicator that are you doing a good job or not. And whenever there's a pain point that pops up, I think if you constantly solves it, then the score should remain high. It's been that's sort of one of our temperature checks on how well we're doing, a measurement of how we're doing for the customer. But through this process, right? Like we understand that at least for the global trade customers, they really care about end-to-end visibility, right? When an exception happens, what do you do? They need like real-time collaboration, messaging, and reporting on the things they care about. So you feel these type of things are fairly generic, but historically, those are all very fragmented systems where if your shipment have an issue, right? Let me go call the trucking team at Origin, right? Versus saying, hey, you have an application that can really show you, no matter what mode you're doing, a really nice unified user experience. And with the COVID hitting, with people working from home more, luckily with this approach, we saw our usage increase by 22% as a general daily active users, and Q3 of last year, I think increased by 50%. So so essentially everybody, right, have to figure out like how to use the tool to get the information they want, because you just can't go to the building. You cannot talk to the other person, get the information in person anymore. So I think that's really, really important. And I think we do solve the problem a little bit differently compared to others in the industry. So, yep.
No, I mean it's fascinating because Flexport really has thousands of customers who really operate in their own way, right? So, yep. and the space has a lot of unstructured data, paper data. How do you get all that into your systems and use that to drive the efficiency in logistics?
Yep. Well, it's really every way possible, right? Whether, we have to take in manual entry, text files, Excel files, API. I mean, luckily there are standards like EDI where I think the larger carriers out there or freight forwarders, we can send data across electronically, right? But we are picking and delivering goods in some of these countries where our partners might not have the best systems, right? So as a design, we really need to figure out how to turn these unstructured physical documents into a digitized format in order for us to do something. So what we've been trying to solve this problem by creating our own standard, creating our own Flexport language of global trade. Hopefully, as we communicate to different parts of the world, we're using a common way to describe things. And meanwhile, the one of the biggest pain point in this space is all the documents, like all the legal documents you need to do to make things flow very efficiently. And applying sort of AI machine learning to digitize these physical documents, or maybe scan PDFs, right, into structured data is really, really important. And then the other thing we're doing in terms of product portfolio is that this last month we launched order management. So order management is like a step before all the shipping happens, right? So for us, that's really important for our customers because what they want, again, is the end-to-end view from their purchasing all the way through shipment. So we start with shipment, right? But now we're expanding our reach to make sure that holistically now we can tie all of our shipment data to the SKU level of their inventory, calculate all the cost. So I think these, even though everybody does it differently, but I think there is an interface or language that people use to communicate with one another. And our goal is, make sure that we deliver the application for the end user to easily, manually digitize everything, right? We build the backend services to process the ones that if we can leverage technology, that'd be great. But ultimately, right, we want to create that tech platform where everything's programmable and we made it so easy for any company to share data across the global. That's where our goal, right? And on top of that, of course, we can have collaboration messaging so that humans can always step in there to resolve stuff that we can automate. So across the board, no silver bullet on solving this problem. So a lot of interesting challenges.
I think we're at scale. We're excited to be able to help Flexport with some of your most ambitious projects in AI. How do you think about where to partner and what to try to keep in-house?
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? Because working together, like, when maybe Flexport will take it ourselves, but just like any business, especially a startup, right? You have to think about what is the true like intellectual property that we're building, right? What things are we creating that provides enterprise value for us, for our users, and our customer, and for the field of AI, right? I think scale is set up to help Flexport scale. It's like this is all you guys do. Hopefully you guys are learning the latest and best on all the different algorithms for us to easily experiment, as well as the operations to, do the first step of the process, right? Like labeling, working together, we need to identify what are the meaningful attributes that we need to label and digitize. So I think our focus is around how can we be that domain expert in global trade, just like I think Andrew and Ning talked about how as you see things moving forward is that there is this need of sort of vertically integrated applications who is very domain specific. And I think Flexport, our goal is to be that domain expert for global trade and global supply chain, right? And leveraging AI is definitely a tool we really, really want to do. And hopefully, we're partnering together to really see how collectively we can tackle this and get to the end faster, right? Because the other way is like, what, Flexport, we can build our army of 200 machine AI data scientists and maybe do almost the exact same work. Maybe 5 years from now, who knows? I mean, we definitely want to do our own experimentation, drive our own innovation, right? But our problem solve is in the space versus generically for everything. So I think that's one of the big difference. And carries this over to even like a financial system, right? Like, should I build an ERP, AR, AP, or should I leverage one? So each one of these decisions, I think if there's a great partner that can do it really, really well, and the way it's structured, is mutually beneficial. I think partner is always a good way to go, right? Especially if it's not your primary problem you're solving. So then this way you can focus your limited resources on what makes the biggest impact for your company. But so far so good. I really love working with Scale so far.
No, that's when we've really enjoyed the partnership with Flexport and look forward to continuing for a long time.
Yeah.
We have some questions coming in through kind of the live stream chat, and so folks, please go ahead and ask questions for James or myself, and we'll field some of those questions in kind of the next 20 minutes. One of them comes from Teddy, which I think ties into what we we're just talking about. But obviously, I'm going to paraphrase these questions a bit. So apologies to the question askers if I reframe your question and miss the intent. But just to try to keep it all in context, I'll kind of reframe things a little bit. But obviously, this kind of AI transformation is not just happening in startups and not just happening in big tech companies like Amazon, but bootstrapping is hard, right? It's a different kind of discipline. And so as you talk to industry peers who are trying to figure out how to bring AI into their businesses and into their practice, how do you encourage them to think about adoption? And where even to start on the software and the people and the hiring?
Yeah. On how to start, right? I think, luckily, there are many companies out there that package it pretty well, like a meaningful application. And I think, chatbot was like the one mentioned earlier, right, you have your support team, and again, there's like historically you sort of do level 1, level 2, level 3, and then maybe you can apply AI machine learning on your knowledge base and see if you can try that and if it's really successful for your domain. Again, right, like the beauty of this whole entire thing is you don't know, like even though it works, it might not work for your case or your scenario. So the only way to find out is really to try, and hopefully the cost of trying is becoming lower and lower. So that's be like number one, right? If you don't have a large budget to build your own technology team, data scientist team and stuff like that, I think trying these applications would be a great way to start. But if you, which I hope everybody will, treat AI and machine learning as a competitive advantage, then you really just have to hire 1 or 2 people who really love this area, right? And who's in tune with all that's happening, and get to a point where you feel there's somebody within your organization that can provide very a filtered advice on what area to plug in and try out within any of your applications. So I think that will be how I imagine like a good way to start that. I do hope almost every company, even if you're a startup, right? I think, if you have a team of 5, hopefully this one of them are really into this space and start reading and pulling in ideas. And you can always say, no, it's too early for us to try, but at least there's somebody, that is bringing it to the table when you have discussions. So I don't know. What do you think, Brad? Like you must deal with so many different industries, and pretty sure a lot of them ask you advice integrated.
Yeah, I also thought Andrew Ng made an incredibly important point this morning that if you have small amounts of data, it's really important that those labels be super precise.
Yeah.
But even if you have large amounts of data, but you have long tail effects, it's really important that those labels be incredibly precise. And so, obviously, that was a lesson I learned at Tell Me Networks when we were training voice recognition systems and grammars, and I learned at Amazon repeatedly. The quality of the data inputs matters so much. Obviously, I believe that thesis so fundamentally that I came to Scale to help a lot of the most ambitious AI projects to achieve that. But I do think, I think Andrew made a compelling point. Like, really, you're programming these models with data, right? As he's pointed out, like, people want to keep tuning the hyperparameters, but at the end of the day, once you've got those reasonably tuned so that your model is learning, then the question is, what is it learning, right? So recently I looked at a data set where had birds labeled, and so we typed in woodpecker, and a whole bunch of hummingbirds showed up. And I don't know if that's
interesting, yeah,
wrong, or because hummingbirds were never really presented as an example. But there's no way that system is going to learn to differentiate hummingbirds from woodpeckers if they're not precise labels that teach it that, right? And so I feel like AI/ML is there's a huge amount of software engineering that goes into setting up the end-to-end pipelines and the data flows, but at the end of the day, you are trying to learn a function from data, and so the emphasis really has to go into how do you have incredibly high quality data that you're inputting into this model, and that can cause really the difference between whether a system can go live in production or not, right? Is the quality of those inputs.
Yeah,
And
well,
then,
right. Yeah, I have a question for you because, like, I think you brought a good point about the hummingbird versus woodpecker, right? So, I think a lot of people believe, like, oh, once it gets working, right, it's gonna it's great. You can leave it off. Maybe everything's automated, but that's not the case, right? Like, based on what the next data stream comes in, the whole entire thesis could be wrong. So are there good practices on, like, how do you monitor this? When do you monitor it, right? Because one of the benefits, like, hey, I can be a little bit hands off the wheel, but then if you're too hands off the wheel, don't look at it. Like, the whole thing or the AI can really take a huge wrong turn. So I'd love to hear, like, what are some of the best practices on monitoring this? There's a point getting it up and running, right? Put in production, but then how do you maintain and drive this thing?
Yeah, no, I mean it's a continuous. This is what I mean by AI systems that don't interact with the real world and don't interact with something that's changing. They don't have to change, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's not most of the interesting AI applications in the world. Most of the interesting AI applications in the world are dealing with a changing world, right? And as a result, you have to be constantly training and adapting your models to different environments or to the changes in the environment. And so, yeah, it ends up being that it's not just like getting the model built. As Andrew said in his talk, it's like that's maybe 50% of the way there, right? Mm-hmm. It's bringing then in continuous learning, active learning, or just a continuous refinement of the process, so that as new events occur, either the system learns or you learn that the system has gotten stuck, right? It doesn't understand why everyone's buying toilet paper right now, right? And so, yeah, it's absolutely critical that I saw this a lot in robotics, right? There are amazing demonstration videos of robotics. Like I'm a big fan of Boston Dynamics. I'm super impressed by their capabilities. But it's always interesting, like that, there's a Wired article that talks about when Atlas did that parkour course, and it mentions that you can only do it correctly once out of 20 times, right?
Oh, I did not know that. Oh, interesting. Yeah,
everyone sees the video. Now, what was really impressive in their latest video this year was that and I don't think people noticed this either, that they had about, I don't know, 6 or 8 different robots interacting, and it was a single cut. Like they did not keep cutting to different dancing robots. Like it was all one scene. Now, if you watch to the very end, then they cut to a few little sequences at the very end. But the point is, you end up having to be somewhat skeptical of that first model result, right? Of that first interaction, because again, if it's not continuous and interacting with the real world and dealing with some of the changes in dynamicism, then what you've done is you've fit the function once, right? But again, the
not
world that
generalized
you're
solution.
evolving in changes.
Yep.
So that's why I was super interested in kind of the Suez Canal and how that's affecting your work. Well, here's a couple others that have come in.
Okay.
Fast forwarding 5 years, when Flexport's able to process all of these, paper and digital documents, what are some of the most interesting use cases you think that enables?
Yeah. So so 5 years out, like, I guess some is fairly practical. Like, one interesting one is, today a lot of our system is built to be template based or rule based systems where you sort of predetermine what a workflow should be. Again, even though every operations team can do everything differently all the time, right? But then in terms of building a system, we sort of have to structure it, right? We had to create a rule-based system that's triggered based on business logic or events and stuff like that. Reality is that I think once we can digitize all the information and capture the steps of actions that's happening in inside a building or as a freight forwarder, right, we're coordinating freight. It'd be awesome to have this AI sitting behind the scenes observing what people are doing, and they can infer why. Like, I don't need to have somebody go back and change the rules behind the scenes to change the workflow, right? The AI will say, hey, for some reason, everybody keep on reassigning this freight to this port from trucking company A to trucking company B, right? Like, why is that? I don't know, but it seems like it's happening, right? And they should be smart to say, oh, maybe the cost is lower. Maybe the other trucking company ran out of capacity. I don't know, but today, those are human judgments, and then maybe we need to go back to our system to create that new rule for routing. Or a lot of time, if it's short term, not sustainable, you do a manual call in direction, right? So to me, I think 5 year now, the exciting part is that I think if AI is in every single touch point, it's gonna self-suggest and learn and tell you what should be done without you telling what to do, and that's gonna be massive savings on what's going on. And if Flexport is that platform for global trade where we see across multiple different carrier freight forwarder customers, right? If we in aggregate we're helping each other understand what's happening, it would be interesting to see if this AI can provide options that otherwise, if you're just by yourself with your limited data view, you don't know there's better option. And I think AI with all this data should be able to show you. And then another one just came to my head. With all these data, right? Another thing that's really interesting for global trade is that we are object to making sure we're compliant and we follow the latest government rules, right? So whether it's tariff, like you have to pay more money, or whether they're blocking a certain type of goods, again, through AI, machine learning, right? If you suddenly see a certain type of shipment being blocked or screened more and more and more, right? Like the AI should go in there and see like, oh, across all these different shipments, like this is happening. Why, right? Is it because there's a government policy change too? So in addition to, operational issues, I think there's a lot of government rules that institutes it, and then you need to adopt it really fast. And today what happens? Well, one, you don't know about it until it's way too late, right? So it could be days before you find out why it's sitting there. And two, you don't know what the solutions are. And through AI, maybe you can see, how did a couple of these companies solve that problem? And you can bring that automatically into our own workflow and help our customer to move stuff around. So yeah, I think in 5 years it should be fairly possible to do that. The suggestion part.
And how do you think about the ROI, the return on your investment, and which investments to make in AI? I mean, there's a bit of a imprecision in exactly what kind of performance you can achieve. So I'm curious of how you've thought about that in global logistics and document processing. Why are those? How do you think about which of those investments to make?
Yeah, so I think for there's different area we can apply, but document digitization is a really easy one, right? Because the economic is you can do it on per document level to say it takes a human X number of minutes to get 100% accuracy. Or if they go a little bit faster, right? Maybe a human accuracy is probably not 100% either, right? It goes to like 90 something, and then based on the labor, you have a dollar amount to say it costs X dollars to process a document. And then, applying machine learning with what we believe is a target of percent accuracy, we can just do a simple math, right? Like this, by being able to digitize to 95%, it's going to save us, 9 minutes per document out of 10, right? So then you can do a pretty simple math. So I think at least in logistics, there's a lot of these very tactical tasks where it's very clearly there's a simple ROI that you can do. I think the harder one would be around the automatic planning and routing, because I think there's way too many other factors involved. A good example would be like SLA, right? Like we believe if we package this together into something, it's going to go faster, maybe at a lower cost. But reality, maybe not. Like you can put in the mathematics, this thing. But like, for example, there are many companies out there today, I'm sure, who just consolidated a container at origin somewhere in Southeast Asia, right? And they're putting on the ship that's going to the Suez Canal right now when it's being stuck. So for me, like, yeah, we can build all this technology, all the AI, right? Like it's going to automate it for you, right? But then is the right thing? So to me, there's stuff like that where it's hard to tell. Is it the right solution to that problem? And what is the ROI? I don't know. Like their ROI is to reduce labor, but then I think human intelligence making a judgment call might be better in that case. So I think there are a gamut of very clear ones and then very fuzzy ones. But either case, as long as we can ultimately use it to better our decision making, I think it's worth it, to a certain amount. But I from a CTO view, or company view that's in sort of using technology as a main strategic advantage, that you just have to allocate X% on your budget, right? It just experimentation, and you go for the one that you think has the biggest impact. If you don't get anything, it's fine, right? This is just the way it is. It's there's no guarantee in this area, but you have to invest. So it's the most important part.
Yeah, I think about that a lot in AI ML projects I've managed or been part of. Is how do you speed experimentation velocity?
Yep.
Right. There are a lot of different techniques, but increasingly for me, it's coming to how do you speed data curation, data cleanliness. Once you have a set of experiments that look like they're within range, then so much of it becomes about the data that you have underneath. Like I want to go a little broader in our last few minutes here. The world of transportation is changing, right? Not just through global freight optimization, but autonomous vehicles, drones, integrated supply chains, just-in-time manufacturing, just-in-time delivery. How do you think of all that evolving kind of over the next 25 years?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be super, super exciting because both the AI technology as well as physical hardware that exists and the compute power that you can do on a tiny little chip. I think 25 years from now, we should be able to model the entire global trade like a living organism. Like literally every single spot, what's happening, right? And there's feedback on what's happening, and then not to a level of Skynet or anything like that. I think there will be a system out there. There will be a technology platform that can act as the global real-time traffic cop on giving every single location on what you should be doing, right? Like go this way, do that, drop this off. Because you have this entire near real-time sensing or communication of data from one end to the other, and that's going to really help you hopefully position resources, a day, a week, a month ahead of time before it needs it. And meanwhile, when things change in real life, right, everybody in the entire ecosystem can really sort of adjust already in real time. So I think that's really, really cool. But then on a practical level, right, speaking of Suez Canal, I believe 25 years from now, when that ship is going through channel, the captain of that ship on their dashboard says, warning, 90% chance you will get stuck, right? You're like, no, I won't. Push the button, go through, or it's like, oh, really? I didn't know about this, right? And then maybe some other groups can say, oh man, I don't know why this guy's taking this risk. He's gonna go down. And then some other teams all right, let's prepare, 30 tugboats, 20 diggers, and in case it gets stuck, I'm able to sort of take it out. But what's happening today, right? You have like one little digger. I love that picture. Sitting there trying to solve this big problem, and then you have the swarm of everybody trying to help out, right? Like, I think 25 years now, hopefully, because of all the data, we know percent of risk, and then potentially have a way to create contingencies in case it happens. So you already have a game plan in place that you can activate, right? It doesn't mean you need to do anything. It just means like you have the plan in case it happens. So I think that's going to be a really exciting role. And the thing that I feel is not going to be able to make the reality happen, right? It's still the same thing because of the silo of data, right? Or in global trade, the hard part is really the for good reasons, right? There's different country-specific policies. So there's stuff that you're want to share, you don't want to share for privacy, security, many reasons, right? So those are, I think, the major blockers for us to achieve that vision. But for a private enterprise that have their own assets and they control some of that, I definitely think is really possible, and that's really exciting. Well, in logistics and freight forwarding.
Yeah, I like your idea. It's not just engineering teams that need to be able to swarm, right? There are global bottlenecks that you need to be able to swarm, and these systems can help make that faster and more efficient. Well, hey, thank you so much for taking the time today, James, and really enjoyed the conversation. Really enjoying the opportunity to work with your teams at Flexport, and so thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you, Brad. It's great working with you again, in a different context, and let's continue to do exciting stuff. And thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.